thank you very much to Chair Dr. Ruchi Singh and my dear colleague Dr. Shiva Shankar Mohanty. And I also would like to thank Dr. Sujauddin ji. He's one of our colleagues and very active members in this diaspora centers. And I also would like to thank Dr. Georgia Donna from the East London University, who have given me opportunity to share my views. It is very important actually to understand the data source, and Professor Bharat sir has already talked about this paradigm shift in the various theoretical framework and this model perspectives. So data is play a very significant role to understand the compositions of the migration to different countries. So I am in this PPT or in this paper, I'm going to cover some important aspects of the sources of the migration and diaspora data, scope, limitation, and challenges. This is my actually paper based on the secondary sources of analysis. So I'm going to discuss on this. So to understand this, actually, Professor Bharat and other eminent special like Professor Khadaria have done lots of work. I am great privileged to present this paper in before them. So it is very important actually the significance of the data to understand. So I am in this paper going to cover to understand the availability of the different sources of data, especially to the macro data in the field of migration and diaspora research in the national and international level, and to see the significance of the different sources of data in the field of migration and diaspora research, and what are their main categories of the international migration statistics available for the research in the national or international level data. And what are the major criteria generally used to identify the migrant or diaspora in the national or international level? So I am going to discuss in this my PPT. So and what are the main challenges and issues and limitations of the data collection, macro and micro levels? I am going to discuss in this paper. So keeping all this view of this paper, I have prepared this PPT. So as already Professor Bharat has emphasized the significance of the migration, and we also know that mobility in the integral part of human existence. Due to the rapid technologies, globalization, and information and communication technology in the 21st century, there is so many folds of migration has been increased, and that is easily seen the impact of the migration of the various indicators in the respectives of the various countries, whether it is in terms of social aspect, in terms of economic problem and issues in their life. So that is important. And in 2015, United Nations General Assembly adopted 2030 agenda for migration agenda for the sustainable development goal. The significance has been play very important role to the various aspects, as Professor Bharat has already talked about this, the reduction of the poverty at the place of origin and the contribution made by the migrant and diaspora communities at the host societies. So here is also very important to understand. To provide safe, secure, regular, and responsible migration and mobility across in the globe, across in the countries, with the help of through the implementation of planned and well-managed migration policies. So data and statistics play very important role. Reliable data plays very important role to the key to is the key to basic understanding of migration and diaspora. Yeah. So method, as per Professor Bharat is already taught about this epistemology and ontology in the context of empirical sources of data, and most of the data play a very significant role to decide the methods and methodologies to understand the migration diaspora. So that characteristics of the migrants play a very important role. So migrants and diasporic communities, as we know, the different types of migration we have across the world and different diasporic communities we have different countries. Are we able to identify the which kind of characteristics we are able to get the statistics to understand the various communities and characteristics across the countries, even the place of origin. So diversity of the nature of communities is play a very significant role. So data sets play a very important role to understand the different sets of composition, how they are playing a role. So any country cannot easily evaluate positive or negative outcomes of the migration if it does not have information about the scale and composition of the migration. In such case, the aim of any policy and program are blurred, and the funds allocated for achieving those objectives are unlikely to relate to the realities. Here I have tried to identify the main categories which are available to understand the international migration statistics in terms of flow and stores data. Stores is generally actually available in the macro level data at a given particular point of time, and flow is the period of time. So very difficult to get the data of the flow of the immigrant or immigrants in any society. So there I have tried to identify that some of the important migrants group like labor migration. So generally data has been collected by at the international level, given by the ILO. Even most of the respective country also provide the national level statistics in this context. And we have important categories of the student mobility. And this international data has been collected by the UNESCO from the respective national country. So there are the mobility, student mobility also a very significant role in terms of crossing the national boundaries. So, and remittances. As Professor Daniel is already in yesterday presentation have given the emphasis of the this migration, diaspora, and remittances. So how we have a gap to understand the data collections. So remittances play a very significant role, which to reduction of the poverty and contribution made by the as a place of origin by the sent by the migrant workers. So as we know, in terms of the absolute remittance, India is the first of the recipient country in the world which is received more than $80 billion. So remittances play a very significant role, and sometimes is also higher than the foreign direct investment, in particularly in low middle income countries. So, and it also has a very significant in terms of share of GDP in the respective countries. So the data particularly given by the World Bank, but we have a very limited data at the national or state level in respective countries. So, yeah. Yes. So now the another categories of the migrant or workers on the, if you look the different set of population like refugee and asylum seekers and irregular migrant. Actually, it is very difficult to get the data in terms of stored or flow data in this in the respective countries, because they have a very limited of data structure in this provided by the different countries. Some of the international agency has given paid lot of efforts to collecting or to analyze the data in terms of refugees or asylum seeker So like UNHCR play a very significant role to provide certain statistics and give the analytical framework of the different countries. So even IOM also play a very significant role for collecting this kind of statistical information. And another important aspects of in the form of this migrant categories, that is the undocumented migrant. Actually, it is hardly we have this data for the undocumented immigrants of the respective countries because, yeah, sorry. Yeah, yes. Are you able to see my PPT, Dr. Uchi Singh?
No, sir, we're not able to see.
Okay. Yes. Now?
No, sir. We're seeing you.
Oh, yes, is it possible now?
Yes, sir, we are able to see now. Yes, sir, it's visible.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's visible,
yes,
na? Okay.
Yes.
So and how do we collect this migration? Okay, sorry, just discussing about the irregular migrant or undocumented migrant. So actually, it is very difficult to collect the data or estimates about the irregular migrants in the respective countries. The certain actually estimate has been given by the respective countries, and the data of the collection of the irregular or undocumented migrant is much more decided by the respective countries. How to identify, how to categorize the migrant as in terms of regular or irregular migrant. Okay. So UNHCR and IOM, International Organization of Migration, play a very significant role to provide the statistics from the different countries. So here we have another group like refugees and trafficking workers who have directly or indirectly actually collected information by the International Organization of Migration, ILO, and UNHCR. But all these international agencies, somehow we have limitations of the actually data sources. So I will discuss on how they have limitations of the data sources. So here is also important to understand the composition and the size of the migrant who are residing in the different continents or different countries, and what are the minimum criteria we should use to identify the migrant in the respective countries. So here just prepare some important points. On the basis of that, we can understand the migrant in the respective countries, especially in the migrant research in the field of migrant and diaspora. It is very difficult to identify who are the migrant, who are the not a migrant, and who are the not non-national citizens. So like how many they are and who are the migrant or not. So like on the basis of, we can understand migrant arrived at the country or left reside for abroad in a specified year. So migrant worker, like migrant worker employed in our country, national or our country were employed abroad. Resident of our country were born abroad. National of our country reside abroad. People crosses our borders annually. Foreigners acquire citizenship of our country. So who are the migrant? As per the described some of the common characteristics we can identify, like the countries of origin and destination, citizenship, sex and age, family status, education, skill and occupation, regions to move, and ethnicity. On the basis of that, we can understand the different respective country, identify the migrant on the basis of this criteria. So different forms of migration actually we can see in the academic literature. So now, so it is also very important. So which kind of baseline or streamline we can use to identify the migrant across countries? So actually, the diaspora or migration is actually multi-dimensional in nature of data. So using some of the statistical criteria, So we can identify the migrant of the respective countries as per the criteria used by the United Nations.
Can you make your screen? It's not visible. Can you make it full screen?
Yeah. Okay. Just wait.
Sorry for interruption, sir.
Yeah. Now is visible. Yeah. Now is visible. Dr.
No,
Ruchi?
sir. No, sir. So you have to just make it full screen. It's already visible. So just try to put a full screen view.
Yeah, that is full screen now from my side. Is it visible now to everyone?
No, sir.
Just. Now?
No, sir. Sir, you can share.
Now it's visible
again.
No, sir.
Okay, just wait. I am again sharing it. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Sir, PPT is not visible. You can.
Yeah, I'm just trying to again. Just wait. Yeah, now visible, Dr. Ruchi.
Just a sec, sir. No, sir.
Now it's. I think now it's visible.
It's not visible, sir.
Oh, just.
The font were so small, sir, so we couldn't read properly. That's why I requested it for the full screen.
Yeah, I have done it. Yes. Is it visible now?
No,
I think
sir.
now it's visible. Oh, what is
No,
happening?
sir.
I don't know. Sorry, actually, I tried to my best. Share.
It's visible now, sir. It's visible.
It's visible?
It went, sir. It was visible.
In my side, it's visible actually.
So a moment ago, it was visible. Again, it's not visible. I think you just clicked it again. So.
Okay. Actually, my whole effort is going to waste actually.
There's a few technical glitches, sir. We cannot avoid.
Yeah,
so don't feel bad about it.
Right.
Sir, you can continue as you did earlier.
Yeah, I'm just going to continue. Okay. So, just I'm going to continue. Okay. So, otherwise, okay. So now it's very important to understand what are the minimum criteria we can use to identify the migrant across the countries. Actually, if you look the United Nations Handbook of the Measuring Migration through the population census and given by the 2070s to identify the migrant of the outside of the countries, that is very important. So keeping on that perspective, so on the basis of usual place of residence, if the person is different, then he or she can be considered as a migrant community of the respective countries. So on the basis of UN criteria, have given very much emphasis to understand the streamline the migrant worker across the countries. So actually, to understand the movement of the people in terms of direction, as Ravenstein also emphasized, to understand the mobility in terms of inward or outward mobility on the basis of direction and duration of the migrant in terms of staying in the respective countries and the distance and the purpose play a very significant role to understand the characteristics and the compositions of various set of migrant groups in the respective countries. So So UN also have given emphasis to understand the criteria on the basis of long-term migrant and short-term migrant. So long-term migrant actually, as per the UN criteria, identify the person who have moved to a country other than their usual residence for at least a year, so that the destination country become their new country of usual residence. So UN try to identify the long-term migration who have spent more than 1 year in the host country. In other words, the person must have had a usual place of residence in one country and at least crossed the international border or entered another country and established a new place of usual residence in the country of destination for at least 12 months, as per the long-term migrant to identify. And UN also given emphasis on to identify the short-term migrants. And that is actually person who moves to a country other than their country of usual residence for a period at least 3 months, but less than 12 months. UN statistical official also given emphasis that actually the mobility in terms of recreation, holidays, visit to friends or relatives, business, medical treatment, or religious pilgrimage are not regarded as a short-term migrant. So country of usual residence for a short-term migrant is a country of destination for a time period of his or her stay there. So UN actually try to identify the collect or streamline the migrant group across the countries. So it has been given by the 1998 UN Statistical Office. So now. On the basis of that aspects and generally use the criteria, we can understand the concept, what are the important concept and types of movement. Like on the basis of direction of migrants, we have in-migration in terms of arrival and or immigration in the respective countries, and out-migration like departure or immigration on the basis of direction in the respective countries. And on the basis of administrative borders, we have like internal migration and international migration. So duration also play a very significant role to identify the short-term migration and long-term migration or temporary stay or permanent stay. So, and reasons also play a very significant role, as I already talked about these various forms of migration, like in terms of economic migrant, skilled, unskilled, semi-skilled, and education, family formation, or family formation of reunification, like voluntary, involuntary migration, and forced migration due to the political prosecution, armed conflict, ecological disaster, etc. And legal status. Legal status also, on the basis of that, we can understand the regular or irregular or undocumented migration. So, and now it is very important that this different set of criteria is not applicable in isolation. For example, in order to count the long-term migration, we need to take into account the direction of the migration as well as the border crossing and duration of stay. Like in terms of example of labor migration. Labor migration is counted with the reference to direction of the migration, in migration or foreigners, out migration of nationals, duration of stay, and employment as a purpose of migration. And now it is also important in this case, there are other sources of statistics are closely connected to migrants' characteristics for the data collection. For example, immigrant may change their status in the respective countries. In a short-term migrant become a long-term migrant and eventually a citizen. In this case, the statistics on the number of the people who acquired long-term residence status or citizenship also characterize the migration process in this country, in the respective country, and should thus be included in the national statistics of the international migration system. And now, what are the important major sources of migration data we generally seen across the countries? So broadly, we have if we look the respective statistics of the different countries, so we can identify the three major sources of the migration generally available to identify the migrant or immigrant or internal migrants or different forms of migration. So like we have a census and household survey. That is one of the statistical sources of data. Actually, census are the most important source of information on migrant scores. And it is also give the statistics of the respective country in terms of internal or international migration. And it is also provide the information about the citizenship of the respondent. It depends on how the particular respective country collect the information and of the their residents and to demarcate them that criteria. And census are universal and often comparable across countries. And on the other hand, they are costly, and many countries conduct census only after 10 years. Some of the countries conducted census like after 5 years, known as the quinquennial census, and some of the developed countries collected information annually. So that is statistics play a very significant role, and somehow we have a limitation of the census. The census do not always capture certain population of interest, such as asylum seeker, refugees, or irregular migrant. And census do not provide information of the causes and consequences of the migration, just provide the statistics of the different set of population and composition of the population reside in particular countries. And another important source of data at the macro level, we have light sample survey. Sample survey play a very significant role to collecting the information about the specific statistics information about the migrant workers. And survey can be devoted to the various topics. Like example, we have a general survey. In case of India, topic survey cover or conducted by the national statistical agencies of the respective countries. For example, employment survey or household survey. So like different international agencies also play a very significant role to provide assistance in terms of data collection. Like we have a USAID to support the demographic and health survey, DHS. And World Bank also providing support to survey on living standards on the different countries. Now, another important source is that administrative data sources. And that play also very significant role of the collection of the immigrant or emigrant population of the respective countries. This include the data, particularly the visa, reside, and work permit. Actually, it is very difficult to, that is the important kind of flow data, actually, but it is not easily available for the actually public domain. So, the collection of data is also varies across the countries. So comparability across countries of this data can be limited. So border control organization is also play a very significant role to understand like the irregular migration or undocumented migration in their respective countries to provide certain statistics on that aspect. Third and finally, that is the important source of migration, also known as the big data or innovative sources of data. So big data, generally we use the mobile phone, social network to collect the information or directly to reach the migrant population. And it can provide valuable insights, for example, into forced displacement. But this data, we have a very much ethical issues and limitations. Generally, the data not available for the public domain. So policymaker, actually, we need to keep it in mind to collect and to make more appropriate in terms of methodologies and address of the certain sets of the population. Yeah. Now, it is also important that the researcher or the experts, which kind of data actually he or she is required during his research. So it's mainly depends on the expert in every country, which kind of information collected for the study. Some of the countries have a separate sources of data or specific departments such as Ministry of Interior and Ministry of Justice. Can you able to listen me my voice? Actually, Dr. Ruchi?
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm audible, sir.
Yeah, sure. So we have actually different kinds of ministry to provide the different kinds of data. We have a respective ministry like Social Justice, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of State Securities, and Ministry of Immigration. And every country have a different kinds of actually agencies to provide to collect the information of the labor mobility of the respective countries. So now it is also important that like some of the countries, we have a uniform unit platform to collect all the information in a single platform. Like now Norway have a different kinds. Norway, the different kind of agency regulating migration may use in a common system for registering information about the immigrant or immigrant. In this way, the different types of data collected would be comparable and consistent. Now I am going to discuss about the actually various international agencies, like we have a UNDESA, like UNHCR and ILO, International Labour Organization, IOM, which provide the statistics of the missing migrant and refugees, or UNHCR, UNDESA play a very significant role for collecting the international statistics of from the different national countries. Like if you look the example of in case of like Indian diaspora. So generally, in the case of Ministry of External Affairs, as per the sources of information of the various set of data, reported that we have more than 30 million of Indian diaspora. But the UN data criteria, as per the report, as per the foreign-born population, we have a 17.5 million Indian diaspora communities. So now we can understand how this different set of data actually become a more complex and become a not easily comparable as per the collecting agency of the respective countries. And there are some important agencies like we have a Pew Research Centers. Actually, Pew Research Center in terms of like providing undocumented migration across the countries. So somehow it's collect the information on the basis of public opinion on the respective countries. And we have like some important public opinion like Golub. On the migration and migration interior. So time to time they take and collect the information to how we can improve the data of the certain categories of the worker. So yes. Now it is important in terms of like sources of migration and diaspora data from the India. So I am going to discuss about what kind of data sources we have to understand the immigrant or immigrant population of the respective countries. The data set play a very significant role in case of India, and we have a huge various ministries are working to collect the information of the migrant characteristics, different kinds of migrant characteristics. So now, first I am going to cite macro data in terms of census of India. So census of India actually provide the important source of data in terms of internal migration, and that is the rich source of data in terms of providing the internal migration. But somehow we have a restricted data on the seasonal or temporary migrants data. Temporary or casual worker data in case of census, but not adequately collected data of the international migration or diaspora data. So census generally collect the data on the basis of the migrant place of birth or place of migration by the place of last residence. And also collected the information on the various causes of the migration. And now second important sources at the macro level, we have a NSS, or National Sample Survey, like for example, 2007 and 2008, 64 round of National Sample Survey, which provide the statistics about the migrant or employment status of the workers who are residing in the different country, even internal border also. So that is controlled by the Ministry of Statistics and Program of Government of India or National Statistical Office. So that actually census, NSSO actually very limited, and actually if you look the statistics collected by the NSSO, much more focus paid by the internal migration and less emphasized on the immigration from India. And And also important in the case of NSSO that it is not regularly collected and published data. And that is known as the large scale sample survey in India on the basis of usual place of residence of the individual were treated as a migrant. Detail or migration, particularly collected during the survey, is play a very significant role. And now important in the case of the diaspora or international migrants communities from the different countries. Actually, we have a more than as per the data source, as per the report of Ministry of External Affairs, we have a more than 30 million of Indian diaspora. If you look in the current 2017 or 18 annual report. But we are actually that diasporic or Indian immigrants community very as a skilled, semi-skilled or unskilled or sometimes is also known as the expatriate play a very significant role to bring the dynamic changes of the place of origin that is India and also the host societies. So contribution of the immigrant cannot be ignored, but as the academician to understand and to find out the certain actually certain characteristics which are available and also find out the certain limitations of the data. So high-level committee has played a very significant role and first published report of the Indian diaspora that is government high-level committee of Indian diaspora in 2002 and provide the estimated Indian communities abroad. This is the most efficient actually measure taken by the government of India to somehow to provide the extensive estimation of the Indian communities abroad. So and that is important in the emphasis of this community given to understand the analyze the location of the Indian communities, situation and potential development made by the respective societies. So that high-level committee estimated that that time in 2002 that we have a 220 million non-residents Indian and person of Indian origin. And in this context of the actually to identify the immigrants, the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government play a very significant role to estimate this kind of population, Indian communities. And now after that we have a Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs. Ministries of Indian Affairs on the basis of recommendation of this committee has been developed. And it was dedicated to all matters relating to the Indian diaspora around the world. And that ministry established in 2004 as the Ministry of Non-Residents Indian. And it was renamed as a Ministry of Over Indian Affairs in September 2004. So that is now it is known as the Ministry of External Affairs in 2016. So Ministry of External Affairs, as we can see in the recent news that play a very significant role for to rescue the many Indians from as a Vande Bharat mission. So Ministry of External Affairs in India, also known as the Foreign Ministry, and there is also one particular actually center, ICM, Internal Indian Center for Migration, and it's provide the population of the overseas Indians in terms of PIO, NRI, and OCI, PIO and NRI in abroad. So immigrant characteristics data in detail not adequately addressed. So there is some actually certain limitations because we have a data in terms of like ECR, in terms of immigration check required, required, but we don't have a detailed characteristics of the immigrant workers. So this ministry provides the published report annually, and it's a responsible agency to conduct of responsible for the conduct of foreign relation of India, engagement with the Indian diaspora communities, and to create the awareness and information and dissemination knowledge of the Indian communities. And there are various initiatives has been taken by the Ministry of External Affairs to set up the Overseas Indian Center across the globe. And there is also important agency within the work under the preview of Ministry of External Affairs that is known as the Protector General of Immigrant. It had a head office in Delhi, and that is actually record the information about the overseas employment of the workers and provide the statistics of ECR and ECNR. So, and also provide the pre-departure orientation and skill upgradation for the immigrant workers. It has a various regional offices across the countries, and to provide the training and provide the actually aware to how they can directly contact in terms of they face any kind of problem in the host societies, and how can they can be actually go to the safe, how they can be live in the safe in the host societies. So the efforts which made by the Ministry of External Affairs cannot be ignored, but in terms of statistics, we have a very limited statistics of the immigrant workers in the host society. Now, another importance of the data sources like migration survey. There are various migration survey has been conducted by the various renowned scholars in India, and like we have a Professor Khadaria is here. I have drawn Professor Khadaria's report, the Indian migration report, the Indian international migration in Americas. So as per the report, which I have also reviewed in 3 years back and published that review in the international journal, and that what I have noticed in that report, we are much more dependent of the immigrant statistics of the respective host societies. So, like for example, USA Statistical Division and US Census Bureau provide much more extensive records of the immigrant workers on the basis of like certain criteria, using the certain criteria. And another example, like we have a recently Professor Rajan already talked about this, the longitudinal studies carried out by the Center for Development Studies of the various migration surveys in 1998 to 2013-14. So this large scale survey play very significant to understand the state level, what is going and how they are various immigrant communities play a very significant role in terms of reduction of the poverty and other dimension. And we cannot also ignore their various problems of the left behind family members also facing. That will be identify the different surveys. And another important surveys also are carried out by the International Institute of Population Studies, IIPS. That is title is International Out Migration from Gujarat: the Magnitude, Process, and Consequences. So this kind of actually analysis will provide much more actually much more information how we can collect the data at the national level. So and here is also important in Center for Diaspora Studies also conducts a micro level survey on the basis of taken help from the students, and they have explored the various foreign immigrants community like the African diaspora community known as the Siddhis, and also see their identity, their issues, prospect, and identity in Gujarat state, and also have seen in the case of like the contribution made by the NRI or diaspora communities in the various districts like Mehsana. So and challenges they face by the different actually student empirical survey. So we cannot ignore what is carried out by the different respective institutions like JNU and SCU working very hard to try to get some micro level or macro level studies to collect this kind of information made by the contribution by the migrant. And another important source in terms of like we have a national archive to provide the historical immigration act, like we have a Indian Immigration Act in 1922, like different photos, documentary, autobiography, and Indian immigrant. So we have a various set of information, but certain how we have a certain limitations. So I am going to now discuss about what are the limitations and challenges we have in case of data collection. Actually, if you look at the compare of the data set of the different countries, actually that is very difficult in case of migration. Actually, to collect in migration data, few countries follow the United Nations recommendation in defining the place of usual residence. And that is also important. National legislation and national definition determine the basis for the collection of statistics, which is the main reason for the incompatibility of the data from the different countries. Not all countries collect the data on the same core census questions recommended by the United Nations Statistical Division on the basis of country of birth, citizenship, and year of period of arrival. In 2010, has been noticed that the different round of census that more than 87% of the 149 countries of the for which data are available on the basis of this criteria had a census question and census question about country of birth. Only 70% asked for the citizenship and 50.3% for the year of period of arrival. It has been also observed that many international migration data sets are related on yearly basis or less frequently, or some migration trends can only be observed retrospectively. And it is also important that the time lag because some of the countries not provide the data on the appropriate time, and it is very difficult to make a policies and awareness of the public to what is going in case of a different set of demographic or social economic characteristics in the respective countries. So data gap become a very important issue. And some of the initiatives has been made by the International Organization of Migration to understand the significant variation and regional data of migration stores availability. In 2017, 18 IOM offices in different countries offered technical support to government counterparts to improve migration data. To reach the realistic perspective of any migrant and diasporic communities issue, it is required much stronger empirical data set. As Professor Bharat sir already talked about that ontology and epistemology is much more based on the data set which are available as per we can see in the Rivestein theory. Moreover, any program and policies become very comprehensive when any country has a strong data set to deal in various issues and challenges related to the immigrant at local, regional, national, or international level. Continuous stock and flow data sets provide the baseline of sound methods and methodologies dealing with any migrant and diasporic communities across the world. Thank you all. These are my submissions.